Hi, we're from the Mount Sinai Light and Health Research Center. In this video, we're going to discuss how ultraviolet light, UVC, can be used to fight agricultural pathogens. In this video, we'll give you some background on germicidal UVC light, and in a companion video, we'll show examples from several different crops. What is UVC? Well, it's a form of energy that you could call a type of light. Here I'm showing a diagram, and I'm reading from left to right, comparing visible light to a couple forms of UV energy. Visible light has longer wavelengths, measured in the range of about 400 to 700 nanometers, which is a billionth of a meter. With longer wavelengths, photon energy decreases. UVA and UVB have shorter wavelengths than visible light. You've experienced the impact of those forms of UV if you've gotten a tan or sunburn, or more long-term sun damage to your skin. Those UV wavelengths do have disinfecting power, but that's not the focus of this video. Our atmosphere blocks the sun's UVC rays, so we have to generate UVC electrically. With those especially short wavelengths, there's a lot of photon energy in UVC. Some benefits of UVC include the following. UVC has been used to fight pathogens in many different crops, and in our second video, we'll go into more detail about that. Unlike fungicide, UVC doesn't leave a residue on the crops, which is important not only for the consumer, but also for workers who can enter the area immediately after treatment, and reduces their risk of exposure to fungicides over time. UVC is consistent with an organic program since it's not a synthetic pesticide. UVC can be administered in any weather or wind condition, though I will say that UVC is generated electrically, so you may want to protect that equipment from stormy weather, and later I'll talk about what time of day UVC should be administered. We found that UVC can be cost-effective in many conditions, depending on what pathogen you're fighting. Lastly, UVC doesn't create resistance in pathogens, unlike antibiotics and fungicides. How does UVC work against pathogens? When the pathogen absorbs UVC, genetic material is damaged in a more or less random manner. By fusing DNA, it prevents the proverbial unzipping of DNA necessary for reproduction of the pathogen. And because the fusing is more or less randomly distributed, it's impossible for pathogens to develop resistance. The pathogens do have a repair mechanism which is triggered by the short bluish-white wavelengths of daylight. Because of this, UV treatment should be followed by a period of darkness, generally 4 hours or so. So that's why 30 to 60 minutes after sunset is a good time for treatment. Here are 3 electric light sources that generate UVC. Low pressure discharge mercury bulbs, also referred to as lamps, have been used for nearly 100 years. LPD bulbs look like fluorescent bulbs, but they have a clear glass tube made of quartz. The peak wavelength that these bulbs emit is 254 nanometers, which is very good for disinfection. Like traditional fluorescent bulbs, these come in just a couple different lengths. Also like traditional fluorescent bulbs, low pressure discharge has a little blob of mercury inside that has to be vaporized, so it is sensitive to temperature and air movements. As a result, low pressure discharge doesn't do well in freezing temps or really hot temperatures. These bulbs go in what look like a strip light fixture with a mirror finish. In the image below, you're seeing the bulbs and several reflections from strip lights treating some apples. Because these bulbs have the mercury inside, there is legislation to phase them out in Europe by 2027. You can still get low pressure discharge bulbs, but pricing may be affected by the phase out. Low pressure discharge has been a big part of disinfection for over a century and is still used today. The future of UVC comes in the form of new LED technology. Some LEDs are designed to emit UVC short wavelengths as low as 265 nanometers. They are small and rugged and not fragile glass tubes in your field. You can see here in the upper right that the actual die is small, but like other LEDs, they need metal heat sinks to keep them cool. We anticipate that different shaped field apparatus will be able to be developed for UVC LEDs. Their photon efficiency is improving steadily. As of 2025, when this video is recorded, the cost of UVC LEDs is not yet competitive with low pressure discharge mercury lamps. but we have shown that UVC LEDs will have a place in agriculture. There is another technology that can be used in agriculture for generating UVC. It's called excimer. To me, excimer looks like a really strong flash bulb. It's created with a flashing arc in a little plasma capsule. The excimer sources we've used contain krypton chloride. They're also described as far UV. These excimer sources target proteins rather than DNA, so they can be used day or night. Proponents of excimer technology claim this is safe for human exposure because the energy is not able to penetrate deep into the skin or the eyes, which may be helpful in occupied indoor spaces. The American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists set a threshold limit value for human exposure for many industrial processes, including UV, and they recently increased their exposure limits. However, excimer is expensive, and the form factor is not really amenable to outdoor applications. It's not really durable for field use, and the safety really isn't relevant for outdoor applications. How much UVC is needed? Dose is the amount of radiation or energy needed for a particular effect. As examples, you might consider a sunburn or inactivation of a bacterium. UVC dose is measured in joules per square meter, and I will be mentioning dose several times in this lecture. Irradiance is one value that needs to be multiplied by time and by efficiency. Irradiance is an instantaneous quantity measured in watts per square meter. You multiply that time duration in seconds, and then there's a third term you multiply, and that's the efficiency at the wavelength you're using. To what extent the pathogen you're trying to fight is vulnerable at that wavelength. This diagram shows that if you're aiming for a dose of, say, 10 joules per square meter, you can use an irradiance of 10 watts per square meter for 1 second, or an irradiance of 1 watt per square meter for 10 seconds, and so on. This kind of reciprocity holds true over a wide range of conditions. However, if you get to really low irradiances for really long time durations, the pathogen's repair mechanisms might be able to outpace the UVC. Or if there's a really high irradiance, you might essentially cook the plant, and thermal effects become important. The effectiveness of your UV light source depends on what the peak wavelength is that it emits. So this curve shows the relative pathogen inactivation efficiency, that is, how well the UV light source that you're considering can inactivate the pathogen's DNA compared to conventional low-pressure discharge mercury sources. So LPD emits at 254 nanometers. If you look at the y-axis, that's 1.0 or 100% effective. That's our comparison case. If you look at krypton chloride excimer source, that emits at 222 nanometers. So looking at the y-axis, that's about 0.8 or 80% effective compared to low pressure discharge. UVC LEDs are available in a wide range of wavelengths, down as low as 265 as of 2025, the year. So if you're considering an LED that emits a little bit lower output, you can read over to the y-axis and consider increasing the duration to make up for the fact that you may not have 100% output. The dose you're aiming for will vary depending on what kind of pathogen you're trying to inactivate. If you look on the left side of this figure, bacteria and viruses are small and tend to require low doses in joules per square meter compared to fungus pathogens, especially dark-colored melanized fungus like black mold or downy mildew. Now, not all pathogens are the same. Here's an example of powdery mildew versus downy mildew. They both have the word mildew in their name, but downy mildew is brown and melanized and requires much higher dose compared to powdery mildew. So let's look at how dose is impacted by the pathogen you're battling. When we worked with cucumber downy mildew, we applied a high dose, 480 joules per square meter, but even then it wasn't as effective as conventional fungicide. As we'll show in the next video, the benefit of UVC was combining both treatments for improved effectiveness. With powdery mildew and yellow summer squash, UVC was very effective at half that dose, 240 joules per square meter. Powdery mildew is a non-melanized type fungus. And then fighting the bacterium that causes angular leaf spot in yellow squash, we used a dose of 240 joules per square meter, and that was very effective. What are some limitations to the use of UVC? If you're using conventional low pressure discharge mercury bulbs to generate UVC, those sources are optimized for still air at 25 Celsius, which is 77 Fahrenheit. If the weather is really cold or really hot, your light sources won't generate as much UV as you expect. So as we saw with those calculations, you might have to provide a longer duration of exposure. In other words, slow the tractor down in order to make up for a lower output of your low pressure discharge bulbs in those temperature extremes. Another point we want to make is that UVC doesn't bounce off of most surfaces except for shiny mirror-like metal reflectors. So you need a direct line of sight from the light source to the leaves you're trying to treat. If you have a dense leaf canopy, lower layers won't get a treatment if they're shaded by upper outer layers. We tested using a blower to create leaf agitation to try to treat the underside of our leaves, but we found that the agitation just blew the pathogen around and was not better than doing nothing. When should I apply UVC? This is one of the first images I've shown in which the UV is being applied to the plants. This researcher at Cornell Agritech, Dr. David Godori, demonstrated that plant pathogens do have their own DNA repair mechanisms that are activated by the blue light we have in daylight. So if we apply UVC at night when there are several hours of darkness yet to come, that helps the UV to be particularly effective. Therefore, don't plan to get up early before sunrise to do your UVC treatment. Also, for that reason, if you're growing in a greenhouse or controlled agriculture conditions and are using electric lighting to promote plant growth, you'll need to keep the grow lights off for several hours after treating with UVC. On our website, we have posted details about how to build an apparatus that you can connect with a 3-point hitch to your tractor. You'll see dimension drawings, materials lists, assembly instructions, rear and side mounting configurations, and these are all built around conventional low pressure discharge mercury bulbs. We're already seeing innovation for UVC LEDs now and in the future, particularly in controlled agriculture with mechanized automated UVC LED systems. What are the risks when working with UVC? Personnel working in the area of UVC should protect their eyes and their skin. For the eyes, use something that covers both the front and the side of the eyes, such as a face shield or safety glasses. Protect the skin with long sleeves, gloves, cover the wrists and arms, and don't forget the neck. When we work with tractor-drawn equipment, we install curtains on the back of the device, not only to keep the UV away from the humans, but we also use mirrorized material to keep the UV focused on the plants. The glass or plexiglass of the tractor cab also protects the driver. So you can see those curtains on the back of the device in the lower left image. If you're using low pressure discharge mercury lamps, note that the quartz glass is breakable. There are sleeves that are available to protect mercury low pressure discharge lamps because they were originally developed for water treatment systems, and they don't want to have mercury in the water system. However, those sleeves do reduce your output. So that addresses a lot of the risks for humans. There's also risk to plants. As for plants, there's a possibility of phytotoxicity. That's damage to the plant depending on the dose. Plants vary in susceptibility, and strawberries are very robust, for example, but beet foliage is not. So it is possible to have too high of a dose on your plants. In part 2, we will show examples of how UVC has been applied to several different crops to fight specific pathogens, both bacterial and fungal. These include strawberries, apples, beets, cucurbits such as cantaloupe, cucumber, yellow squash, and grapes. And by the time you're watching this, we may have our results about UVC with acorn squash and onions. Check our website for links to videos and other materials, and follow our YouTube feed. We want to say thank you to our sponsor, the New York Farm Viability Institute. Thank you to Chuck Bornt of Cornell Cooperative Extension, and thank you for watching this video.